Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question that might make you uncomfortable, but it could change your life. What are you saying to yourself when no one else is listening? Because the most powerful voice you will ever hear is not the voice of your teacher, your boss, your parents, or your critics. The most powerful voice is the one inside your own head, and for many people, that voice is not encouraging. It's not uplifting. It's not saying you can do it. It's saying you're not good enough. You've failed before. Why try again? Negative thoughts don't just show up one day and ruin your life. They sneak in quietly. They grow roots. They repeat themselves. And over time, they begin to sound like the truth. But hear me clearly today. Just because a thought shows up in your mind does not mean it deserves to live there. Negative thoughts are not facts. They are habits, and habits can be broken. Many of us are living far below our potential not because we lack talent, intelligence, or opportunity, but because we are running old mental programs that were never designed to help us win. Programs built from past failures, painful experiences, rejection, and fear. Maybe you tried something once and it didn't work out. Maybe someone told you that you were too slow, too quiet, too loud, too different. Maybe life knocked you down so hard that you started believing you should stay down. But let me tell you something. Your past does not have the authority to define your future unless you give it permission. Transforming negative thoughts into positive ones does not mean pretending everything is perfect. It does not mean ignoring pain or denying reality. It means choosing a more powerful interpretation of your experiences. It means when your mind says, I failed, you respond with, I learned. When your mind says, I can't, you say, I'm growing. When your mind says, it's too late, you say, as long as I'm breathing, I still have a chance. You see, positive thinking is not about being soft. It's about being strategic. Every negative thought has a cost. It drains your energy. It weakens your confidence. It limits your vision. And if you keep feeding it, it will shape your decisions, your actions, and ultimately your destiny. But here's the good news. You can interrupt that cycle. The moment you become aware of your thinking, you take back your power. Start listening to how you talk to yourself. Would you speak to your best friend the way you speak to yourself? Would you tell them they're a failure because they made a mistake? Would you tell them to quit because it's hard? Of course not. So why are you doing that to yourself? Transformation begins with awareness, but it grows through repetition. You didn't develop negative thinking overnight, and you won't replace it overnight either, but every time you challenge a limiting thought, you weaken its grip. Instead of asking, what if I fail? Ask, what if I grow? Instead of saying, this is impossible, say, this will require more of me. Instead of thinking, I'm not ready, say, I will become ready by taking action. Positive thoughts don't come from wishful thinking. They come from intentional thinking. And let me tell you something else. Your environment matters. If you surround yourself with negativity, your mind will absorb it. If you constantly listen to discouraging voices, your inner voice will begin to sound just like them. You must guard your mind like it's the most valuable real estate you own, because it is. Feed it with words that empower you, stories that inspire you, people who remind you of what's possible, and on the days when negativity feels louder than hope, because those days will come, stand firm, talk back to your doubts, speak life into yourself, even if your voice shakes, even if you don't fully believe it yet. Say it anyway, because confidence is not the absence of fear, it's the decision to move forward despite it. Remember this, you are not your thoughts, you are the thinker of your thoughts, and that means you have the authority to change them. When you transform your thinking, you transform your choices. When you transform your choices, you transform your habits. When you transform your habits, you transform your life. The world does not need you playing small. It does not need you doubting yourself into silence. It needs the version of you that believes, tries, fails, learns, and rises again. So today, make a decision. Decide that negative thoughts may visit, but they will not move in. Decide that your inner voice will become your greatest ally, not your biggest enemy. Decide that no matter where you've been, your mind will now be a place of hope, strength, and possibility. Because once you change the way you think, there is absolutely no limit to what you can become. Your thoughts shape your reality. Change the thought, change the life. Every action you take, every decision you make, and every result you experience begins with a thought. Before anything shows up in your life on the outside, it exists on the inside as an idea, a belief, a perception. Long before success or failure becomes visible, it is rehearsed quietly in the mind. That is why two people can face the same situation and walk away with completely different outcomes. It's not the circumstance that defines them, it's the thinking they bring to it. Many people spend years trying to change their life without ever changing their thoughts. They change jobs, relationships, cities, routines, but they carry the same mindset everywhere they go. And wherever you go, there you are. If the inner dialogue stays the same, the results will eventually repeat themselves. A mind trained in doubt will find reasons to quit. A mind trained in fear will find excuses to stay small. A mind trained in possibility will find ways forward even when the odds are stacked high. Thoughts are powerful because they influence how you interpret events. When something goes wrong, one person thinks, "This is proof I'm not good enough," while another thinks, "This is feedback, not failure." The event is the same, but the meaning is different, and meaning determines emotion. Emotion determines action. Action determines outcome. That entire chain begins with a single thought, often so fast and automatic that it feels invisible. But invisible does not mean uncontrollable. Most limiting thoughts were learned, not chosen. They were absorbed from experiences, environments, and voices that spoke before you had the strength to question them. At some point, someone else's opinion became your belief. At some point, a temporary setback became a permanent label in your mind. Over time, repetition turned these thoughts into internal laws. But no law written by fear deserves lifelong obedience. When you change a thought, you interrupt a pattern. You create space between what happens and how you respond. Instead of reacting automatically, you begin responding intentionally. That space is where power lives. In that space, you get to decide whether a challenge becomes a stopping point or a stepping stone. You get to decide whether a mistake becomes a prison or a lesson. Positive thinking is not about denying struggle or pretending pain doesn't exist. It's about choosing thoughts that move you forward rather than keep you stuck. It's about asking better questions instead of asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" You ask, "What is this teaching me?" Instead of saying, "I can't handle this," you say, "This is stretching me." The brain responds to the questions you ask it, and it will search for answers that match your focus. Thoughts repeated often enough become beliefs. Beliefs acted on consistently become a lifestyle. A lifestyle lived long enough becomes a destiny. That is why guarding your thoughts is not optional, it is essential. What you allow to dominate your mind will eventually dominate your life. If you constantly tell yourself that you are behind, you will move with hesitation. If you tell yourself that you are capable of growth, you will move with courage even when unsure. Changing your thoughts requires awareness and discipline. Awareness to catch the old narrative when it shows up. Discipline to replace it with something stronger, not something fake, but something constructive. Instead of "I'll never get this right," you choose "I'm improving with effort." Instead of "I'm not enough," you choose "I'm becoming more than I was." These shifts may seem small, but small shifts repeated daily create massive transformation. Your mind believes what you tell it most often. Speak defeat, and it prepares you to lose. Speak possibility, and it prepares you to try. Life responds not just to what you want, but to what you consistently expect. Expectations influence behavior, behavior influences results. When expectations rise, standards rise. When standards rise, performance follows. The moment you realize that you are the one generating most of the thoughts shaping your experience, you reclaim authorship over your life. You stop living on autopilot and start living with intention. You begin to understand that changing your life does not always require changing the world around you, but changing the world within you. Negative thoughts are habits, not truths, and habits can be broken. Most people treat their negative thoughts as if they are accurate descriptions of reality, when in fact they are patterns formed through repetition. A thought repeated long enough begins to feel familiar, and familiarity is often mistaken for truth. The mind is a powerful recorder. It remembers failures more vividly than successes, criticism more loudly than praise, and pain more deeply than progress. Over time, these recordings play on loop until they sound like facts, even when they are nothing more than learned responses. A habit is something you do without conscious effort, and negative thinking works the same way. It shows up automatically, especially under stress, pressure, or uncertainty. When something doesn't go as planned, the mind quickly reaches for its usual script: self, blame, doubt, worst-case scenarios. This happens not because it is correct, but because it is familiar. The brain is designed to conserve energy, and habits require less effort than new ways of thinking. That is why negative thoughts feel so convincing. They arrive quickly and confidently, as if they have authority, but authority does not equal accuracy. Just because a thought is loud does not mean it is right. Just because it has been around for years does not mean it deserves to stay. Every negative thought can be questioned, challenged, and replaced. The moment you stop accepting a thought automatically, you weaken its control. You begin to see it for what it is, a mental reflex, not a verdict on who you are or what you can do. Negative thinking habits are often built during moments of vulnerability. A failure becomes "I always fail." A rejection becomes "I'm not wanted." A mistake becomes "I'm not capable." These conclusions are rarely examined. They are simply repeated, and repetition builds belief. But beliefs formed in pain are not always aligned with reality or potential. They are survival mechanisms, not growth strategies. Breaking a habit begins with awareness. You cannot change what you do not notice. The first step is to observe your thoughts without judging yourself for having them. Notice the patterns. Notice the words you use internally. Words like always, never, can't, too late, not enough. These are not neutral words. They are signals of habitual thinking. When you hear them, it's an invitation to pause rather than obey. Once you notice the thought, you create a moment of choice. In that moment, you can ask, is this thought helping me or hurting me? Most negative thoughts fail this test immediately. They do not inspire action. They do not increase clarity. They do not offer solutions. They drain energy and shrink perspective. A thought that limits you is not a thought that deserves your loyalty. Replacing a negative habit does not mean forcing yourself to think unrealistically positive thoughts. It means choosing thoughts that are honest and empowering at the same time. Instead of "I can't do this," you choose "this is challenging and I can learn." Instead of "I always mess things up," you choose "I've made mistakes and I'm capable of improving." These replacements are believable, and belief is what makes new habits stick. Repetition is the key to rewiring the mind. Just as negative thoughts were strengthened through repetition, positive and constructive thoughts must be practiced the same way. At first, they may feel uncomfortable or unnatural. That discomfort is a sign of change. The brain resists unfamiliar patterns, even when they are better. Consistency is what teaches the brain that a new way of thinking is safe and reliable. Your environment also reinforces mental habits. The people you listen to, the content you consume, and the conversations you engage in all influence which thoughts get repeated. When negativity surrounds you, it becomes easier for negative thinking to feel normal. Choosing healthier inputs is not avoidance, it is discipline. You are training your mind just like you would train your body. Negative thoughts lose power when they are exposed to evidence. Look at your progress, not just your problems. Look at what you have survived, not just what hurt you. The mind tends to ignore evidence that contradicts its habits, so you must deliberately bring that evidence into focus. Each time you do, you weaken the old pattern and strengthen a new one. Habits do not disappear because you want them to. They disappear because you replace them with something stronger, practiced more often, and chosen with intention. You are not your past, and you are not your failures. Yet, for many people, the past feels like a permanent identity rather than a collection of experiences. Old mistakes, missed opportunities, and painful memories quietly shape how they see themselves. The mind has a tendency to turn events into labels, and once a label sticks, it begins to influence every future decision. A failure becomes a definition. A bad chapter becomes the whole story. Over time, people stop trying not because they lack ability, but because they believe they already know how the story ends. The past has no voice of its own. It only speaks when you give it permission. It shows up through memory, emotion, and interpretation, but it does not have the power to decide what you do next. What gives the past its strength is repetition. When you replay old moments again and again, you reinforce their emotional weight. The event may be over, but the experience continues internally. This creates the illusion that the past is still happening, when in reality, it only exists as a thought in the present. Failures are often misunderstood. They are treated as evidence of inadequacy instead of information. Every failure contains data: what didn't work, what needs adjustment, what must be strengthened. When failure is viewed as proof that something is wrong with you, growth stops. When it is viewed as feedback, growth begins. The difference lies not in the failure itself, but in the meaning you assign to it. Many people carry shame from moments that required courage. They tried something, risked something, believed in something, and it didn't work out. Instead of honoring the courage it took to try, they punish themselves for the outcome. This creates a false lesson: don't try again. Over time, avoidance feels safer than effort, and comfort replaces possibility. But safety without growth eventually becomes another kind of prison. Separating your identity from your experiences is essential. An experience is something that happened to you, not something that defines you. You made a mistake, but you are not a mistake. You failed at something, but you are not a failure. These distinctions may seem simple, but they are powerful. The language you use internally shapes how you interpret your worth. When identity and experience are fused together, every setback feels personal and permanent. The past cannot be changed, but the meaning of the past can. Meaning is not fixed, it is assigned. A difficult upbringing can be interpreted as damage or as resilience. A failed attempt can be interpreted as proof of limitation or proof of courage. When you change the meaning, you change the emotional charge attached to the memory. That emotional shift opens the door to new behavior in the present. Letting go of the past does not mean forgetting it. It means no longer using it as a measuring stick for your future. It means recognizing that who you were then is not who you are now. Growth happens quietly and gradually, often without immediate evidence. Skills improve. Awareness increases. Strength develops through endurance. When you judge your present self using outdated versions of who you used to be, you deny the progress that has already occurred. Failure becomes dangerous only when it is never re-examined. A failure left unprocessed turns into fear. Fear then disguises itself as logic, convincing you that trying again is irresponsible or unrealistic. But fear based on old outcomes does not account for new knowledge, new perspective, or new effort. Each attempt is made by a different version of you, even if the goal looks the same. Reclaiming your future requires honesty and compassion. Honesty to acknowledge what happened without distortion. Compassion to allow yourself to be human in the process of becoming better. Self-punishment does not produce excellence. It produces hesitation. Growth requires space, patience, and permission to evolve beyond earlier versions of yourself. The moment you stop using your past as a verdict and start using it as a reference, its power over you begins to fade. What remains is experience, wisdom, and the ability to choose differently now. What you feed your mind determines how high you rise. The mind is constantly consuming information, whether you are aware of it or not. Every conversation, every image, every sound, every repeated idea becomes mental nutrition. Just as the body reflects the quality of food it consumes, the mind reflects the quality of thoughts and information it absorbs. If the input is poor, the output will be weak. If the input is empowering, the output begins to change. Many people are mentally malnourished without realizing it. They start their day feeding their mind with worry, comparison, complaints, and negativity. They replay problems before they even get out of bed. They listen to voices that reinforce doubt and fear. Over time, this diet shapes how they think, feel, and act. They wonder why motivation is low and confidence is fragile, not recognizing that the mind has been trained to expect struggle instead of possibility. The mind does not argue with what it repeatedly consumes. It accepts it. If you constantly expose yourself to messages that say life is unfair, success is rare, and people cannot be trusted, your mind will begin to operate from those assumptions. These assumptions influence decisions in subtle ways. You hesitate more, you risk less, you lower expectations. None of this happens suddenly. It happens gradually, quietly, through repeated exposure. Feeding your mind intentionally is an act of self-respect. It means choosing what deserves your attention. Attention is energy, and whatever you give energy to grows. When you focus on problems all day, your mind becomes skilled at finding problems. When you focus on solutions, learning, and growth, your mind becomes skilled at adaptation and creativity. The direction of your focus trains the direction of your thinking. Information alone is not enough. The mind must be fed with meaning. Inspiration, encouragement, and perspective help the mind interpret challenges in a healthier way. When you hear stories of resilience, effort, and transformation, your mind expands its sense of what is possible. Possibility does not guarantee success, but it increases effort. Increased effort increases skill. Increased skill changes outcomes. The people you spend time with are also part of your mental diet. Conversations that revolve around blame, excuses, and limitations reinforce a narrow view of life. Conversations that involve ideas, growth, and responsibility stretch your thinking. You may not immediately notice the effect, but over time, your inner dialogue begins to sound like the voices you hear most often. Choosing your environment is not about superiority, it is about sustainability. Your mind is always being programmed, either by design or by default. If you do not choose what goes in, the world will choose for you. News cycles, social media, and constant comparison can overwhelm the mind with noise and distortion. This does not mean avoiding reality, but it does mean filtering it. Not everything deserves your emotional investment. Not every opinion deserves space in your head. Consistency matters more than intensity. Feeding your mind once with something positive does not cancel out weeks of negativity. Just like physical health, mental strength is built through daily habits. Reading something that challenges you, listening to ideas that stretch you, reflecting on progress instead of only problems. These small actions compound over time, reshaping how you see yourself and the world around you. What you feed your mind also affects how you talk to yourself. A well-fed mind speaks with clarity and balance. A starved mind speaks in extremes, fear, and self-criticism. When your internal dialogue improves, your emotional resilience improves. You recover faster from setbacks. You stay engaged longer. You keep going when motivation fades. Rising higher in life is not only about external opportunity, it is about internal capacity. Capacity is built by what you repeatedly consume, believe, and rehearse. When the mind is nourished with growth-oriented input, it begins to look for ways forward even in difficulty. It develops endurance, patience, and confidence rooted in preparation rather than hope. When you take control of your inner voice, you take control of your destiny. That inner voice is with you every moment of your life. It comments on your actions, judges your efforts, predicts outcomes, and interprets experiences. Long before the world responds to you, your inner voice has already formed an opinion. It can be your greatest source of strength or your most consistent obstacle. The direction of your life is heavily influenced by the tone and content of that voice. For many people, the inner voice is harsh, impatient, and unforgiving. It magnifies mistakes and minimizes progress. It replays failures more often than successes. This voice often sounds reasonable because it has been rehearsed for years, but familiarity should not be confused with wisdom. An inner voice shaped by fear and self-doubt does not protect you, it restricts you. It keeps you cautious when boldness is required and silent when expression is necessary. The inner voice learns from experience and repetition. It is trained by how you speak to yourself during difficulty. If every challenge is met with criticism, the voice becomes critical. If every setback is met with discouragement, the voice becomes discouraging. Over time, this internal commentary becomes automatic. It speaks before you have time to question it, influencing emotion and behavior almost instantly. Taking control of your inner voice begins with listening. You cannot change a voice you are unaware of. Notice the words it uses when things go wrong. Notice how it speaks when you are tired, uncertain, or afraid. These moments reveal the default programming. Awareness creates a pause, and in that pause, choice becomes possible. Once you notice the voice, you can challenge it, not by fighting it aggressively, but by questioning its accuracy and usefulness. Ask whether the voice is helping you grow or keeping you stuck. Many internal statements fail this test. They offer no solution, no encouragement, no direction. They only drain energy. A voice that drains you does not deserve control. Replacing the inner voice does not mean silencing all doubt. It means guiding the conversation. Instead of allowing the voice to attack your identity, redirect it toward behavior and improvement. Shift from "I'm not good at this" to "I need more practice." Shift from "I always fail" to "this attempt didn't work." Language matters because the mind responds differently to identity-based criticism than to action-based feedback. The inner voice also sets expectations. If it constantly predicts failure, you approach opportunities with hesitation. If it expects difficulty but believes in your ability to adapt, you approach challenges with resilience. Expectations shape preparation. Preparation shapes performance. Performance shapes results. That entire sequence begins internally. Self-talk becomes most influential when no one else is around. In private moments, when motivation is low and fear is high, the inner voice determines whether you continue or quit. External encouragement can inspire you temporarily, but internal encouragement sustains you. A supportive inner voice does not guarantee success, but it increases persistence, and persistence changes outcomes. Control of the inner voice requires practice and patience. You are undoing years of conditioning. At first, the old voice will return quickly. That does not mean you are failing. It means you are becoming aware. Each time you redirect your self-talk, you weaken the old pattern and strengthen a new one. Over time, the new voice becomes more natural, more immediate, more believable. Your inner voice influences how you see opportunities, how you recover from mistakes, and how you treat yourself during growth. When that voice becomes steady, honest, and encouraging, your behavior aligns with confidence rather than fear. You take healthier risks. You stay engaged longer. You stop interpreting setbacks as stop signs and start seeing them as signals to adjust. Destiny is not a single moment or a dramatic event. It is built through daily decisions, repeated actions, and sustained effort. The inner voice is present in all of them, shaping direction moment by moment. When you guide that voice with intention, it begins to guide you toward consistency, clarity, and forward movement.